up there, but the Irish people say none of that. We were the Irish gillies, and we taught the gentry how to do those casts, so they say it was developed on the Shannon River in Ireland. But the Spey cast was formed over 150 years ago to cover big rivers catching Atlantic salmon, and the common method was to start off with a fixed length of line, maybe 60, 70, 80 feet, pick it up and put it right back across the river with what we now call the single spey. Steve is now demonstrating the single spey, starting off in the downstream direction, and this is called river left because the river flows downstream to our left. He picks it up, pivots, anchors, gets a little loop behind us called the D loop and fires it across. So this is the change of direction cast, the classical single spey cast. And in a way, it's the most efficient of all of our spey casts. Question?
Sorry to interrupt you real quick. What size rod and line weight is
This is a very, very light grease line rod. It's 15 feet long for a 7/8 weight line. It's the lightest grease line rod that G. Loomis makes right now.
Spey casting has a different rating scale. If you're mostly familiar with trout fishing rods or single-handed rods, a 7/8 is like a 10/11 in a one-handed line rating. Part of the reason the casts go so far is we're swinging a much heavier line size through the air. It goes relatively slowly through the air as compared to like a double haul on a single-handed rod. So we get our distance by using a relatively heavy line. The front of the line has a long tapering front taper, so it unfurls smoothly and kicks over the cast at the end. We're going to dissect the parts of the cast, which will then hold true to the other kinds of casting. On the downstream dangle, as it's sometimes called, or the hang, from that position at the downstream hang, the first maneuver is called the lift or the pick. It's kind of lifting, breaking water tension from the line, and when it's done all in sequence, the break-free aspect will carry close to the leader. From there, the next step is to change your direction by both rotating the body and a little bit of the arms and the hands. So lift, rotate your body to determine your new direction. Then coming back with a little bit of a downward dip in the tip to help anchor the line or splash the line near the angler. And the goal is to place the anchor approximately a rod's distance away. One of the biggest mistakes in the learning phase of spey casting is to put the anchor point too far away. If it splashes far away from the caster, it will not readily release and cast forward. So the key thing is to practice placement of the anchor point. The goal being approximately a rod's distance away on the, in this case, upstream side of your body. So we all together now pick, turn, anchor, and cast. There is this loop behind the rod called the D loop. That's the lifting. So we don't want to lay the line landing in the water. That's another common mistake in all forms of spey casting. So we lift, we turn, we anchor, but then we drop the back cast down into the rocks or the sand behind us. So the D loop lands too far behind us and splashes. Sometimes you'll hear this slurping noise, and that's because the line landed. So as you come around for that D loop, a little bit of a lift up. So pick, turn, anchor, lift up, and cast. Those are the basic steps of what we call single hand spey casting, or single spey casting, single spey. And that works perfectly on this side of the river. But what happens if you're on the other side of the river? What happens is we need to do a different cast called the double spey cast. And we're not going to be drilling anybody here, but the mechanics of the double spey are you lift and flop half of your line length upstream direction and then come around in front of the angler facing forward and then cast out. So it's kind of like a plop half of the line upstream, use that as your D loop and your way to bend the rod. One more slow motion, and then we're going to have you face the river and do a left-handed double spey. So flopping it halfway up, go forward and around, level with the water, pick it up at the back end and cast. Okay, great, Steve. Show us that cast, if you would, by double spey, but we're going to change hands, which, granted, we've just been tarpon fishing together for the last week, and this might be his first left-hand double spey of the year. Flop it upstream, circle around sidearm, and cast. And if I wasn't in the way, that would have been a 90-foot perfect presentation. Sorry about that. All right, go do that one more time.
Here, I can hit the slot between the two oranges here real well, probably. We're pretty close. Here, and then always rising. From the point that you start your rod tip here, the big mistake is that people usually come around here and they dip their rod back down. They're putting line back on the water. We want that rod tip to go from low, smoothly, 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 high, and then fire. Thanks.
Well done. Okay, so the traditional form of spey casting largely is a fixed line cast. Largely you're just holding on to it at 60 feet, 70 feet, 80 feet. You pick it up and you lay it right back down every time, and you evenly cover the distance. You could shoot the line out. You can use various weight forward type bellies, and this is a long belly line. It's about 70, the orange part is probably 75 feet or so, and then there is very thin line behind. It is possible to shoot a lot of line if your skill level allows you to aerialize and manage that whole long line. So you can shoot it, but in general, the traditional style is talking about just fixing the line, leaving it all out there, and cast. The rods that go with these traditional styles are generally longer and more powerful of all the categories of spey casting. They're generally 14 to 16 feet. In the old days of green heartwood, up to 20 feet long, and you had to be full of what's that mash that they eat in Scotland? Haggis. You got to have a lot of haggis. Use those 20-foot rods to work the big rods. That's it. So anyway, the long, powerful, medium, fast, beefy rods are the rods tuned towards that kind of casting. So this style of casting prevailed for over 100 years. That's what everybody did, salmon fishing for spey, for Atlantic salmon. But thanking some of the tournament casting people in Scandinavia that were familiar with what a shooting head is, there was a transition going on in the late 50s, early 60s, 1960s, became popular to use a shooting head line and monofilament or thinner fly line.
I'll talk a little bit about spiral single too and snake bow maybe.
You want to do that first? Yeah.
Okay. It's easier probably with this one.
We won't change over.
We'll go in a second
Before
here
we
maybe.
graduate over to the second generation of spey casting, there are some other elements of the cast that we'll describe here. Now, the most common way to lift the line from the water is just a simple lift up. It breaks the water tension, and then you can recast. But if the line starts to sink down a little bit, and in fact Steve started this way, and he used sinking tips on the end of these long lines as a way to help break the tension of the sinking tip, he can use a little bit of a spiral pick to initiate the cast. Watch what he just did there. He had the line dangling down. Instead of just the standard lift, he kind of starts up high and then underlifts to do a spiral. So it's like a lift and a spiral at the same time. Lift and spiral underneath. And that's a way to break the water tension further on down to the tip of the line near your leader and fly.
When I first started doing this, probably close to 18, 19, 20 years ago, there were no such thing as Skagit or Scandi lines, at least not available to me. And I was fishing for winter steelhead here in the Pacific Northwest and using 15 feet of sink tip on the ends of long belly lines. When you get a fly sunk down in that deep water down there, it's really hard to get it elevated. What happens typically is you'll lift and your anchor for the last bit of your line will land way down below you. So what I came up with was a cast that would help aerialize that line very quickly. And that was just a spiral. All you have to do, the amount that you rotate around dictates where you make your cast. And it's kind of cool too, because even with 15 feet of sink tip on there, I could actually aerialize it. Sometimes you could really get cute and throw 2 or 3 in there, just for fun. What? Can't hear me? Sorry, guys.
All right. So that spiral can be more than one, but initially it's lift up and go underneath, and then that little circle transitions down the line and breaks the water tension away, helping you to break free and reposition your line and cast. Good. How about the snake roll? Did you want to talk about that right now?
The snake roll is just a variation for people to do in just a single move, and it replaces basically the double spey on the